So I finally watched Dream Scenario, and it brought upon a lot of thoughts and eventual frustrations. From impressed to shocked, excited to, by the end, very disappointed. There were multiple reasons I had been hyped for this movie since it was released, but the main one of course being Nicolas Cage, especially when you add his name next to a horror movie. I've said it before, but I have always been a huge fan, and even though some of his film choices can be a little too out there sometimes, for better or for worse, this was a film that even his undeniable screen presence just couldn't save. Maybe it was my high expectations, but for the entire second half, I was left with this empty feeling and felt forced into finishing it. I know that sounds dramatic, but I really was having such a great time for the first 45 minutes that the void of anything compelling from the last 45 really pulled the rug out from under me. It kept leaving me underwhelmed and ruining the first half. This film simply didn't know what it was or where it was going. Make sure to like and subscribe, and let's try and find out how this movie failed at fulfilling such a high potential. Director Christopher Borgli has been in the business for a while now, but I would say his break into the spotlight was after his 2022 Norwegian film Sick of Myself started getting some buzz, which funny enough released exactly to the day 1 year before Dream Scenario. Thought that was an interesting fact, but anyway. The film is a comedy horror about a couple where the man is becoming recognized for his artwork and his girlfriend relentlessly tries to derail this out of jealousy. Described as a dark comedy about the social media age and the problems that come with it, on an absurd scale. I personally haven't seen it, but some trusted friends of mine gave it good reviews, and overall the general reception was positive. So it would only make sense that his American debut would be somewhat of an extension of this style and these ideas with Dream Scenario. Another quote-unquote comedy horror, which I want to explore that term in a second, with a premise rooted in modern age social media concepts with a bleak Black Mirror style twist. Something that the production company A24 sinks their teeth into every time they get the chance. Match made in heaven, right? Now, I don't really like the term comedy horror. I mean, all genre titles are a little arbitrary at the end of the day, especially with the rise of weirder surrealist films starting to become more widely accepted and revered, and genre blending being more common. But what is a comedy horror? Are the scary movies with Anna Faris comedy horror? Are dark comedies comedy horror? And does being just horror adjacent like a Beetlejuice constitute a horror title? And I know what you're probably thinking, James, why the f does this matter? Talk about Dream Scenario. But it does matter, specifically with marketing and the tone of the film. It matters when a film is either trying to be something it's not, or failing to fulfill the qualities of a horror and or a comedy. Something Dream Scenario very much did. I mean, the tone of this movie is completely off. But there is a middle ground between these. Tragedy. Now, we aren't going to get into the old English definitions of a comedy versus a tragedy, although it shows how related these genres are and how certain plot devices can swing a piece back and forth from them. This is something these surreal dark comedies are known for. And tragedies can very much be horror films. Just look at two of the most recent A24 movies that use tragedy to a horrific effect in a very surreal, meta, and socially topical way. Beau is Afraid, and I Saw the TV Glow. These are films that are under the horror genre for different reasons, having components that are typical for horror/thrillers. But there is enough that aren't that it could make these not fully feel like horror movies. But the underlying purposes of these stories, a tragedy, is so horrific in nature and the feelings it invokes, to me at least, make it terrifying. It feels like watching a horror movie. But tragedy for the sake of tragedy doesn't always work. You have to pity the character, but not enough to the point where you lose empathy for them. You feel bad for them, but also connect and understand them. And Paul Matthews, played by Nick Cage in the main character of Dream Scenario, is going through a tragedy. But he is just pathetic. So the premise of the movie, if you didn't already know, is Paul is a college professor who randomly starts popping up in a lot of people's dreams all over the world. He, in his day-to-day, is pretty bland, not doing much outside of work and his average suburban lifestyle with his wife and 2 daughters. Not much personality, pretty reserved, kind of a nervous pushover, quiet guy, and overall just content. And this is further shown as in every person's dream where he is present, he does nothing. He's merely a bystander in these fantasy situations, never intervening, saying anything, or doing anything. But this clearly being a phenomenon that one could only classify as otherworldly makes him a celebrity. Not only is the story itself practically mythical, but so many people know who he is because he is in their dreams. He's interviewed, people ask for pictures and autographs, he's like a spiritual figure that everyone wants to figure out. At this moment in time, he's the most interesting and famous person in the world. Now, there is so much right there in the premise. I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen those videos or online posts, usually with a title like, "Have you ever seen this man in your dreams?" And it's usually an uncanny valley face and just very creepy looking overall. Then you look away because you're worried you might see him in your dreams, and then that face becomes a haunting memory that never leaves your mind and only creeps in every now and then to remind you of how terrifying that guy once looked. Too specific? Okay, but anyway. It's such a unique and creative idea for a movie, and for the first half, it made for such a great journey. The dreams that they created were so surreal and actually felt like what dreams are, using shots and cinematography that were so interesting and looked really good. And Nick Cage was portraying this character so well, yet just because of his look, it made his presence in these dreams feel very ominous. They were doing a pretty good job at this idea. And then we get this dream with this intern at a company trying to hire him for marketing. The first dream where he does something. It is so damn creepy looking at him in the corner and then, oh, he has sex with her. Okay, I mean, that's definitely on the list of average dream experiences, so yeah, someone was bound to have a sex dream about, oh, and then he actually goes to have sex with her? Okay, kind of turning his somewhat likable character into a bad person, but we aren't done. He comes his pants and then farts when she grabs his leg? Is this the comedy they're referring to? This moment right here was the downfall of Paul Matthews and the downfall of this movie. But after this, people start having nightmares where Paul is at the center of them. Instead of just walking by like before, now he is attacking them, assaulting them, and even murdering them. The dreams are so horrific that they are scared of him in real life. See, this is still kind of a good premise. But then his tragedy starts as he starts to lose everything in his life. His wife leaves him, he loses his job, he really can't go anywhere without people leaving, hating him, exiling him, and even attacking him back. He tries to make a statement online but ends up just crying and saying he is the real victim because he never did anything and never asked for any of this. Which part of that is true, he isn't really hurting anyone, it's just their dreams, but he did enable this newfound fame. So if you couldn't tell already, and I'm sure you know this if you've watched the movie because they are very explicit about it, but this movie is a take on cancel culture. Because of public opinion and everyone creating the narrative and story around him, he is then punished and ridiculed for what they believe he is. In this case, he is wrongly accused and doesn't really deserve this. But they make his character so pathetic and just completely unlikable that it's hard to care. His tragedy doesn't really make you feel anything. So not only is the message of this story pretty messy and at many points annoying or even politically charged, the person we are supposed to feel for turns into a pathetic whiny shell of something that didn't really offer much to begin with. The movie really feels like it was written by someone who was canceled, and while there could be an interesting perspective there, it's pretty hard to understand or relate to that perspective. One, because the tone is so off with this film, and two, I mean, for the average person, it's hard to be like, yeah, I was famous too and the world had an opinion of me. That's like 1% of people. Someone like Bo or Owen are rooted in real human problems that all of us face. They are people we can see ourselves or other people in. So if you're gonna have this fantastical route of a professor turned celebrity because of a miraculous situation, give us reasons to root for him. I mean, he has little to no moments in this movie where you're like, yeah, I'm starting to like this guy. But see, this right here is the overarching problem with this movie and the reason that it failed. There are many different conversations to be had about what it's like to go from a normal person to everyone knowing who you are. What's it like to be in the public spotlight? Although cancel culture conversations are usually draining and annoying, there is a psychological aspect to it that would be super interesting to explore if they did it right. I mean, just dreams in general and why we have them is such an interesting conversation, yet they never really explain why it happened or really fully dive into it at all. I'm not looking for a scientific answer, but come on. And then his character. There is a lot to explore there that they just completely leave behind. He doesn't take charge in his life or the dreams, so maybe he starts taking charge to get his life back? Are the dreams people are having of him a reflection of his true self? I mean, literally anything. The only thing he really does is in the dream world. Like, there's nothing redeemable about this character, really. This movie, like so many others, just didn't know what to do. From the tone and genre being a mix of half-baked surrealism, quirky trying to be funny, and very small glimpses of horror and tragedy, they had such a unique and interesting setup and then said, oh, well, we have to make a movie about this. Okay, then what's gonna happen? Where's the story go? Oh, we will figure it out. I'm sure the premise is enough. But it's not. The premise is not enough. I do get it though, like, I don't think I would know what to do with this either. Getting Nick Cage was probably a great move. I mean, he does do really well with the pretty bland source material. Yeah, I'd probably throw some cool shots in there too. But this is something that happens all the time to creatives and just anyone in general. You have a really good idea, but then you have to think about what's next. The idea of a horror movie centered around the "have you seen this man in your dreams" premise is such a great idea. That's why I was so excited. But maybe that's all it was. Just an idea. Those online stories about these uncanny valley faces usually lead nowhere, which adds more to the mystery and allure. Who is this man? What do these dreams mean? What's going to happen when I see them? Is this man real? These are questions that might be better left unanswered so the horror of it all isn't lost. It's like when you turn the lights on and the man in the corner of the room was just a coat hanging. It's nothing. So why did this movie fail? It was an unfinished idea that turned into a socio-political statement that really had nothing to say. It wasn't funny, it wasn't scary, and it was a forced film that didn't deliver on any of its promises. But maybe it was never supposed to. I don't mean to completely hate on this movie, and honestly this is like my first fully negative review on this channel, so I'm still trying to give the film some grace. I think the reason I'm so charged up about it is because, like I said, I was having so much fun. It was a perfect movie to watch with a group of friends. We were laughing, shocked, discussing what we thought certain things meant and where it was going to go, to then just looking at each other with the same blank stare. What in the hell are they doing? It would have been one thing to have done nothing, for the story to literally not go anywhere. Vibes alone can carry a movie sometimes. I mean, look at hangout movies, something like A Paris, Texas, or even I Saw the TV Glow, where a lot of the meaning is in the subtext. But instead, they ruin the story trying to be something it's not. Is this a serious metaphor for something very prevalent in our society today? Is this a philosophical discussion about the power of dreams? Or is this an anti-woke propaganda with fart jokes in it? I mean, the ending of this movie, like right before the last scene, oh my god. Like, come on man, say something interesting or don't even try. Cancel culture is a really hard thing to discuss. I mean, I have my opinions both ways, but it's a floodgate that I don't really want to open at the end of the day. But if you were going to touch on this, you have to be sincere. Hell, if you're going to take a stance on it, you really got to convince us to believe in it. Whereas this really felt like Cody Ko made a movie about how people turned on him. If that doesn't sound exhausting and messy, then maybe you'll like this movie. But for me, it just plain disappointed.